Okay. The next step in lesson 3 is dimensioning your objects. So let me just kind of move these around a little bit to make it a little more understandable. I'm going to turn my ortho mode off so it doesn't get all cluttered here, okay? And again, I'm going to use that center point. Okay, so your dimensions are right here under annotation. Now, annotation can include text as well, but we're going to focus right now on dimension. Now, this is the dimension tool specifically, and these are the types of dimension. Now, you have linear, which is just what you would use normally for your rectangles. You can also use it for polygons. You can use it for, and you can also use it for pretty much anything, but I would say most of your straight lines. Aligned, you're going to use that for if you're making certain triangles, that's a good one to use. I use it a lot to show distance between two awkward angles in a floor plan with furniture. So just keep in mind, this one might be the better choices. Angular, now you're going to use that if you're trying to do an angle within a shape or outside a shape. We don't typically focus on arc length, but you can measure the full length of an arc if need be. And then you have radius and diameter. We're not going to work on ordinate or jog in this lesson. We may get into it later, but not right now. So what I want to focus on initially is going to be radius and diameter. Now, these two are pretty simple. If you have radius active, you're just really going to have to select the object, and then you'll draw it out. Now, what you can see is what's going to happen is it's going to be teeny weeny. So remember when we worked with properties previously, we can go ahead and manipulate that. So I'm going to type in properties. So my properties panel comes back up. All right. And if you look over here, when I have that dimension highlighted, I can change what is shown. So there is an arrow, but it's really not that visible. So I'm going to put 4 and see what that looks like. For this dimension, it's too little. So you may have to manipulate it a little bit, but now I can see it, okay, because my radius is 100. So this is a big unit. So you need to have that proportion correct. Then the next, whoops, I don't want to do that. The next thing it's going to ask you that I want you to realize about is your height. Now, you can manipulate it and make it prettier or aligned with certain elements of the dimension line, but right now I'm just going to focus on what you're utilizing to indicate where you're pulling the dimension and the height of the text so it's visible. So again, maybe we put 10 in there too, because we already know that the arrow is very apparent at 10 with this size. Okay, so if you escape, it is now unselected. Okay, so I have radius of this circle. Okay, so I used the radius. Now, if I change it to diameter, it asks the same thing. But when I click it, again, it's teeny. Okay, and you can see the symbol change. This is the symbol for diameter. But there's an easy way to manipulate this. Rather than going back to my properties and changing everything I just changed, if you type in MA, it is a tool called Match Properties. So what it's going to ask you is, what's your source? So my source is what I've already changed. And then I select what I want to be changed. So now both of these match. Okay, so match the properties. So if it's on a different layer. So another thing we go over in this specific lesson is layers. So what I have you do is change your layers, and you have to think of these as kind of like a notebook. So I want your shapes on one page, I want your dimension on another page, because I may want you to manipulate your shapes, and if there's a lot of dimensions on your overall piece, I want you to be able to turn off the different layers so you can work with the shapes and then put the dimensions back on. So kind of like transparencies. So you start out with 0 and def points. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click this little star, and I'm going to name this shapes. And I'm going to change my line color to be red. Then I'm going to click it again, and I'm going to name this dimensions. And I'm going to make that yellow. Now, if you use a light background, if you've changed your properties so that the interface is white, you may not want these colors, but I use black. So now that those are created, you can close that window. And if you look up here in your layers panel on that drop-down box, they're now here. So if I select my diameter dimension and then pull this down so I see the layer that has dimension on it, all I have to do is click and it automatically goes there. Same for the shape. Select the shape, pull the drop down, hit shape, and now that's automatically on shape. So once again, I can type in MA, select the one I already placed on the right layer, and now both of these are on that layer. The nice thing about it, like I said earlier, is you can turn them off with the light bulb. They're still there. You haven't lost anything, but it may get complicated in more intricate patterns and designs that you may want the dimensions off initially. So let me just run through these other ones real quick. So linear, you would just endpoint, endpoint, pull. Again, for the side, you do the same, endpoint, endpoint, pull. And then since these are dimensions and you do want them separated so you can visually see the difference, MA again, select, pull, pull. So now those are obviously dimensions as compared to my match properties, my shape. So then for this one, you can do a linear and go end to end and do the same thing. Oops. Now the last one I want to show you is doing a line here. Now this one, I'm going to hit endpoint to endpoint and see how it aligns specifically with that. If I did a linear from here to here, see that it looks different? Now, will it have the same length? No, because this one is measuring where this is compared, where this point is compared to that point. And this one is actually measuring the line itself. So keep that in mind because that's important to realize. This one is just taking into consideration basically the elevation from this point to that point. This one is considering the actual length of the line. So that's important to note. And then the last thing I want you to know is angular. So what it's going to ask you is, where are you measuring between these two lines? You can measure between on the outside as well. Oops. Maybe that's here. But just keep in mind that this should be, a 360. So walk through it. Whoops. I don't want you to do that yet. Walk through it. Hopefully it'll make sense. Remember, you can turn these on and off. Remember, you can get to your layer properties by this button here. Hopefully that'll clear up any questions you might have about the project.